Hello and welcome to the Plant School podcast. I'm Rachel Tenney, and here we learn all about plants, how they work, how to care for them, and it's all taught in a way that anyone from beginner to expert can listen to, understand, and enjoy. So I hope that you will join me in Plant School. Hello and welcome to the Plant School podcast, and happy Thanksgiving to all my US listeners. The plan is to post this episode on Thanksgiving Day, so if you're listening on the day that I post this, happy Thanksgiving. If you are listening to it after Thanksgiving, I hope your Thanksgiving was great and you enjoyed time with your loved ones. Today we are diving into the Pink Congo plant scam. This may be something that you're familiar with if you have been into houseplants for a few years, but it has been a while since this all went down. So even if you are familiar with it, perhaps you don't know all the details to it. I didn't know all the details to it, and it was so interesting to dive into this story. And before we get into the story, we're going to do two things. First thing is our giveaway. Every episode, I do this giveaway, and I've partnered with Market Botany. You can go check them out at marketbotany.com. The owner, Cameron Curry, is a friend of mine, and he's created Prop Drops, which is a water propagation aid. You just drop in a few drops to everything you're propagating in water, and it really helps them. So if you are interested in winning, if you're listening on Spotify, you can leave a comment on this episode and that will automatically enter you in. Comment anything that you would like. You can tell me if you are familiar with this story or maybe if this was the first time you're hearing it. You could tell me if maybe you even own a Pink Congo plant or just whatever you would like. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, leave a review and that will automatically enter you in to win the giveaway that I do every episode. So our winners for today's episode, starting with Spotify, last week we were talking about Christmas and Thanksgiving cactuses, and our winner today, her name is Tanya T, and she said, "Thank you for the information. I have a hard time getting my Thanksgiving cactus to bloom, so I'm hoping for better luck now." I hope so too, Tanya. I mean, if you listen to that episode, I am sure you are good to go. Go ahead and email me at tennyplants@gmail.com. That's TENNEY plants. And once I get your address, I will get that giveaway package sent your way. Moving over to Apple Podcasts, our winner today, the username that they have is Charlemagne with a little castle emoji. And they said, "This podcast helped make it fun to get into houseplants. Always amazing to hear about the wild plants out there." Totally agree with you, Charlemagne. I'm so glad you're enjoying the podcast so far. Go ahead and email me at tennyplants@gmail.com. I'll get your address and send you those prop drops from Market Botany your way as well. Okay, and the second thing I quickly wanted to talk about before we get into the story of today's episode is my new Plant School merch. I've been talking about this on the past few episodes. I'll have this linked in my show notes, but also you can type in Plant School Podcast fourth wall, and that first result there will pull up my shop. I have created all new designs that I really love and I'm really proud of. It ships all over the world, not just the US. And this is an amazing way to help the Plant School podcast keep going, to support a small creator like myself. I'm very aware of how much of a small creator I am, and this really helps keep this podcast going. So if you would like to see it keep going, definitely check out the new merch. Click on that link in the show notes. In my opinion, there is something for everyone on here. And to kind of celebrate kicking off my new Plant School merch, I am choosing winners who have made an order. So there will be one winner that will win $200, and then I am also choosing 3 other winners to win $50. And this will just be your general Visa gift card that you can use wherever. But yeah, I hope you guys will check it out. They're all really fun. My husband has been living in his Plant School hoodie that I got him, which we love, a supportive husband. He's literally the best. There's also an ugly Christmas sweater on there that is plant themed, as well as some other botanically themed shirts from carnivorous plants to monsteras to botanical stamps. They're all just really fun. All right, let's get into this episode. So we're diving into what is informally called the Pink Congo plant scam. This is a scam that had people all over buying these beautiful Philodendron Pink Congos, only to find out that in a few months, up to a year, that their pink plants were not actually what they seemed to be and what they were made out to be. So let's start out in the very beginning of our story. We're going to kind of go chronologically as best as we can. So this story starts in like the 2018 to 2020 period. And what happened is that there was a big hype on social media surrounding pink plants just in general. The Philodendron Pink Congo was not around yet, but everywhere people were loving pink plants. There were a lot of plant influencers that had really exploded around this time, especially in the 2020 period with COVID and everyone in their homes. I feel like the houseplant world just blew up. That's actually when this podcast started, was in the year 2020. But most notably, there was the pink princess philodendron, and it was kind of seen as this trophy plant, especially on Instagram. There's very much an aesthetic over there for showing off your house plants. But the pink princess philodendron was also all over YouTube with people doing plant hauls and showing off their collections. And you could find it everywhere on Etsy being sold. And just a little bit about the Philodendron Pink Princess. It is not involved in the scam of the Philodendron Pink Congo. It has variegation that is pink, and it is consistent. This pink does not occur naturally. It is a mutation of the plant. All of these pink princess philodendrons are sold from tissue cultures that have been made in mass by growers. And that is simply because it is a mutation of this plant, and that is the best way that they know how to replicate it in mass quantities. In fact, I came across this story that kind of highlights how big pink plants specifically became. So there was one grower, their company name is Gabriella Growers, perhaps you are familiar with them, but they talked about how they had been growing the Philodendron Pink Princess for decades. It was nothing new for them, and then all of a sudden, their wholesalers came to them and made giant orders for their pink princess philodendrons, ordering literally every single one that they had. And a few months later, this would happen again, and they started to actually offer more than what they were asking for. So, for example, a wholesaler would say, oh, we can pay you $2 extra per plant than what you are asking. So Gabriella Growers, the person in the story, their name is Malloy, they decided to look into this. This was kind of strange for them. It wasn't a usual business practice. And so they started to Google search and realized that the Philodendron Pink Princess had skyrocketed in fame. There were plant influencers out there, YouTubers out there that had been posting it, and it had just blew up in the houseplant hobby space. So Malloy decided to try something that Gabriella Growers had never done before, and they got on Etsy and they got on Facebook and they started to sell them there because it was a profitable business opportunity for them. And I totally get that. So their normal price for one of these plants was about $6.50. But because of demand, they had to keep raising the price. So then it was $50 per plant. And then at its peak, it was around $100 per plant, and they were still selling out. So you can see here, there's this hype going on. It's ridiculous. You could make really high margins of profit for these pink variegated aroids. And so let's move to the second part of our story. And this is where the Philodendron Pink Congo suddenly appears and it starts selling. Where it specifically came from, we're not exactly sure. It's really hard to find like the original seller, but signs do point to them starting in Southeast Asia, and there is a big language barrier that has made it difficult to pinpoint where this all began. So it's thought to have began over there, and all these listings start coming up, most notably on Etsy, but other places as well. Wholesalers were able to get a hold of them and they started selling them, but it is this philodendron with these very bright, almost like bubblegum pink leaves. And they aren't variegated like your pink princess. They are completely pink, like these pale pink leaves, no green at all on them. There were a few green leaves at the base, but all the new ones in the center that were coming out were all pink. So these growers started to sell them, and they were kind of matching the price of the pink princess. Influencers were buying them, they would resell them, and they could even go up into like the $200 range easily. But the problem was the Philodendron Pink Congo is a fake. So this is where the scam started to fall apart. Plant experts and big-time hobbyists started to notice that something was off. So people in plant groups started discussing how these leaves, they looked kind of unnaturally fully pink with, there was no green tissue present on many of the new leaves. And that is just biologically very suspicious because stable variegation, it usually shows up in patches or in stripes. It usually doesn't create a whole leaf that is one color and entirely missing its chlorophyll. That just doesn't happen. If it were to, it would be extremely rare and it would be maybe that one plant and then it's gone. But to have all of these plants all have its new leaves be completely pink just seemed very suspicious. And so that prompted investigation, an informal investigation. There is no police, there's no FBI or anyone involved. It's just internet sleuths doing their thing. So what people started to notice is that over time, these pink leaves would revert back to being fully and completely green. Then you're just left with this regular philodendron, nothing very special about it, and there's no way to go back to being fully pink. And since this took time, it could take a few months, it could take a year and a half. The realization that the Pink Congo was probably a scam started out as just a rumor, started out as speculation, and then people started to realize, oh, we might be onto something. This actually is not what it seems. So around February of 2020, the plant community at large started to post out warnings and publications that this is not what it seems. So one notable plant-fluencer, I guess you could call him, his name is Robert McCracken, and he made a Facebook post, and he was probably one of the very first ones calling this out in a very public way. And from there, other publications started to pick it up. Other YouTubers started to cover this story. It even got picked up by Wired, NPR, IdeaStream. They were all covering this story. And it kind of started with Robert McCracken on his Facebook post. So this is what he said. This was his original post that I found. He said, "I have just finished researching the product and process that induces the temporary pink color in the Philodendron Pink Congo, aka Chameleon Congo." And it sounds like he got some information from an Indonesian grower. And this is what they said. The product, the Pink Congo, has had a form of auxin applied to it, which stimulates ethylene production in high concentrations. Ethylene is a gas that is used to turn unripe green tomatoes bright red for our grocery stores' produce departments. It is also used to make stunning shades of pink and red in imported Korean echeverias. It's a type of succulent. I've seen the effect of ethylene and greenhouses heated with wood-burning stoves which emit the ethylene gas. White brumangias that bloom in winter are pink. I'm sure other readers know of more examples. And Robert goes on to say that you should be aware of this before buying the Pink Congo because that ethylene application has been used for the Pink Congo. He actually took out the product name that this Indonesian grower was using. He did this because he didn't want people finding out the product name and using it themselves. But he goes on to say that if you're using it for like a pink-themed wedding, that's fine when everyone is informed. But his big gripe is that your average houseplant hobbyists are buying it with no information that this pink is not going to last. That's when a YouTuber by the name of Kaylee Allen picked this story up. She made a post on her Instagram warning people that this plant is not what it seems and went on to make a few videos about it. She also didn't want to name the chemical or hormone that they were using because she also didn't want people taking it and trying it on new plants and trying to sell it to unsuspecting buyers, which actually I saw some people criticizing them for, that in fact the best thing to do would be to publicize the product so that other people could use it and demand would go down and prices would go down as well. I don't really have an opinion on what I think is right or wrong. I don't really know. But this did, in fact, happen with people finding out the product. In the beginning, Robert McCracken did say the product name, and he went back and deleted it. But a few months later, other quote-unquote rare plants were popping up. For example, there was like this Facebook post around this time showcasing a Calathea macoyana, pink diamond is what they called the cultivar. And it had this very unusual pink variegation all around the outer edges of its leaves. Like the outer edges were just full on bright pink. Did not look natural at all. In fact, the comments were very critical of this plant. They said that it seemed like it was the Pink Congo scam that was unfurling in real time. Robert McCracken himself got on and he chimed in saying that it was definitely fake and that it looked like the chemical had been painted around the edges of the leaves. And it probably was that way, even though the original owner of the plant denied that allegation. But this was a huge problem with plantfluencers going so hard in their pink plant collections because it was all the rage. They acquired their pink Congos, other people were buying pink Congos, and it slowly just started to unravel of, oh, this plant is not as great as it seemed. So basically what it was doing, because I am always interested in how things work, but this auxin/ethylene treatment would encourage the loss or reduction of chlorophyll to the point that it would alter the pigments to temporarily appear pink. But as we know, it would revert or fade back. It appears that many growers would spray it on, but the exact process is largely unknown due to the things I mentioned earlier of the language barrier and people kind of gatekeeping this information because they don't want it to become a standard practice that is used to deceive people. Kaylee Ellen, that YouTuber I mentioned earlier, she actually partnered in one of her videos with another creator named My Clean Leaves, and they went around and messaged sellers at the time in the thick of this whole scandal, letting them know, hey, this whole thing is a scam, it's unraveling right now, you should take these off, you should let buyers know, you should reduce the price because it's not what it seems. And actually a lot of the sellers had no idea. They responded really kindly saying, oh my goodness, I didn't know this. I'm going to add a disclaimer or I'm going to remove them completely, which I think is a very mature response to have. But Kaylee also got her hands on a conversation that was screenshotted between two sellers who seemed to be aware from the very beginning that the Pink Congo would lose its pink color, but they decided to sell them without disclaimers, without letting anyone know. And they were kind of talking back and forth to each other saying, oh, I knew this from the beginning. What do I do with all this stock? We have to add disclaimers. But it sounds like they also continued to charge the high prices that they were going for. So not every seller responded in a reasonable way, but I feel like for the most part they did, or they were bullied into doing so because the Pink Congo did eventually fall off and it is not nearly as popular as it once was. Which brings me to my last point. Let's talk about what has happened since that Pink Congo scam and what is going on today. So today you can still find pink Congos for sale. I looked them up. I found one and it did have a disclaimer on it, but a lot of people will buy them to be decorative and they understand that it has that temporary color piece. I've seen that they're pretty popular for weddings that kind of have that pink theme to them, or quinceañeras where they want pink foliage. And actually, as I was looking into it, Pink Congo actually made a very brief comeback between 2020 and today. And this happened largely on Etsy. So this whole thing kind of popped back up 2 years later in 2022. And these sellers, there were no disclaimers. So unsuspecting plant collectors who weren't aware of the Pink Congo scam in 2019-2020 fell into the same trap. They'd buy them and months later they would realize, oh, this is not what it seemed. I didn't know it was chemically induced. And by that point, it's way too late to make a claim on that seller because you bought this plant months ago. So here's the thing, they named it under a different name. They called this plant Philodendron Pink Dark Lord, and also Philodendron Pink Micans showed up. And they were going for the prices that we saw back in 2020. It doesn't stop there. There was even a Philodendron White Congo that also popped up in this time of 2022. And again, it did fool some people. But over time, people started to realize, the mask kind of fell again. People were like, oh, are these all chemically induced like the Philodendron Pink Congo a few years ago? And sure enough, they all were examples of that. And that pink color, or that white color, in the case of the Philodendron White Congo, did not last. Kaylee Ellen, the YouTuber, again, did a whole video on this. She posted it in March of 2022 when it was a problem. It was right in the thick of it, and she said she looked at hundreds of listings on Etsy and found only one or two that actually had a disclaimer that these plants were chemically induced. Many sellers outright denied that chemicals were used. Some would tell her, oh, well, they can just Google it and figure it out themselves. If they didn't realize it was chemically induced, that's just on them, which I don't think is very fair. And some customers in their reviews on Etsy, you know how you can leave a star rating. Some even said that they could smell this chemically smell coming off of their pink micans. This whole scandal was shut down fairly quickly because people were aware of the Pink Congo scam. And so when I looked it up today, we are in, the end of 2025, I could not find the White Congo anywhere, not even on Etsy. I couldn't find Philodendron Pink Micans or Philodendron Pink Dark Lord, but I could find the Pink Congo, and every one that I could find, like I mentioned earlier, it did have that disclaimer that it was chemically induced and would not last. Which I feel like if you have that disclaimer in there and you're not charging exuberant prices, there's no problem with that. I feel like this whole thing is a cautionary tale for the houseplant community about, transparency in what you're buying and chemical manipulation of plants, because it's nothing new. Gibberellic acid is added to peace lilies to induce flowering. But if it's something like in the Pink Congo's case, where you are buying it specifically because it is pink and that will not last for it, I feel like that's a little bit shady. And also I feel like this is a cautionary tale in the dangers of quote unquote buying the photo, where you see your favorite plantfluencer out there and you see their beautiful plants, or you see shops posting photos of these beautiful plants. Just be wary of anything that seems too good to be true. And also, just to wrap this up with more of some of my own thoughts, I feel like this whole story is nothing new. Humanity has always had this appetite for rare plants. We have tulip mania to look on. That's probably the most notable one. But in our modern day, we have, pink plants. We also have the variegated monstera, the Thai constellation. That was a huge deal just a few years ago. And so this is nothing new for us to crave things that are rare or visually striking, but it definitely highlights the unfortunate truth that there are some, and there will probably always be some, that are willing to deceive customers to make a profit on plant sales. I think that's one of the things that bugs me about people claiming that houseplants clean the air, because you look at the studies and it is simply not true. When NASA did their study, and I know I've said this so many times for those of you who listen to my podcast consistently, that NASA study that is quoted again and again by marketers of, no, look, see, they do clean the air. NASA did this study in an enclosed chamber with these plants, and they did clean the air. But we do not live in enclosed chambers. Our air is constantly circulating in our homes, and because of that fact, plants do not have a noticeable effect on improving our air quality. And so when I see that as something that people will use to sell their plants, that also rubs me the wrong way, because it is scientifically not true. It is not proven that in your homes, houseplants will clean your air. An enclosed chamber, sure, but none of us live in that. So the whole scam of the Pink Congo is kind of a more poignant example of this, of deceiving customers to make a profit. Also, another thought I had while going through this story is you see awful listings that are just completely not true. That's what I mean by awful, of weird plant seeds that can grow really ridiculously colored plants. You can tell it's not real. It'll be like a blue Venus flytrap or just whatever. And maybe this highlights a need for like stricter laws when it comes to selling seed and plant material. I'm sure there are already so many laws in place, but people do fall for that kind of stuff. I even saw someone selling seeds to like grow what looked to be the piranha plant from the Mario video game. And you just know that someone out there has fallen for it and bought these seeds thinking that they are going to grow some sort of piranha plant. And I'm not super knowledgeable about what laws already exist out there. Maybe there's some loopholes that these people are going through. Perhaps there's a whole nother set of research for another episode. But there does seem to be some loopholes that people selling plant material or seeds can get through to sell you a product that is not what it seems to be. And my last thought, I actually came across some people making the point that this whole Philodendron Pink Congo debacle was not a scam. It was just a miscommunication and everyone is being dramatic about it. It's no one's fault. But to that, I do disagree. I think there definitely is some fault on the shoulders of the seller. It should definitely be their responsibility to give full disclosure to those buying their product. No one wants to buy something and it be something different from what they are expecting. It degrades at customers' trust, and I feel like withholding that information feels like outright lying to the customer. Anyways, those are some of my thoughts when I went through this whole story and learned about it. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about this whole Pink Congo scam. It's been on my list of an episode I wanted to do for a very long time. I think it was one of the very few times the plant community has had some drama. Overall, I feel like the houseplant community is very drama-free. We're all just very chill, but when the Pink Congo came along, it definitely was an outlier and caused a lot of drama for everyone involved. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope all of you US listeners had a great Thanksgiving, and I hope that you'll be here in 2 weeks for a brand new episode of the Plant School Podcast. Thank you so much for being here and for listening to the Plant School Podcast. I hope that you will join me for our next episode. And if you would like to support this podcast and keep it going, there's a link down in the show notes of this episode where you can donate to this podcast. And I really appreciate all that help. Or you can go to my merch store, which is also linked in the notes of this episode, and you can find some really cool plant-related shirts and stickers. And if you want to support the podcast but spend no money, feel free to share it with a friend, leave a review. All these things greatly help me out and allow me to keep doing this. Again, thank you so much for listening and for being here at the Plant School Podcast.